Well, I don't believe this particular J6er, who admitted to doing the crime, then did the time, and is now back in the free world. I don't think this person is representative of a particularly large group of Trump supporters. However, I think this person is representative of what we are going to be, is a good representation of what we are going to be hearing from a lot of Trump supporters when they come out the other side. Because there's going to be basically three options. They can either pretend like they weren't really Trump supporters and all the shades that'll come in. They're going to pretend like we just didn't understand what Trump supporters were all about and all the shades that'll come in. Or they can do the honorable thing. They can admit they were wrong and change their ways. And here we have an example of just that played on CNN.
Earlier, we told you about the January 6th defendant arrested with weapons in President Obama's neighborhood, but now another January 6th defendant, a grandmother and former Trump supporter who went to prison for her actions on January 6th, who's now speaking out against the former president for what she calls his gaslighting. Gary Tuckman has more.
As she celebrates America's independence at a fireworks show here in Boise, Idaho, 70-year-old Pam Hemphill can't help but remember how she felt on July 4th of last year, because she was getting ready to go to prison.
Even though you were unhappy and scared in prison, you feel you were guilty of what the crime was.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The January 6th Capitol insurrection. Mother and grandmother Pam Hemphill, who had recently been diagnosed with breast cancer, was there. She had long enjoyed taking video of political events and told police at the Capitol she was a citizen journalist. But she also believed former President Donald Trump's false claims that he won the election. And this is what she was telling people outside the Capitol as she shot her video.
Whose house does it belong to? It's my house. Come on in. You just come in. Come on in.
She continued shooting video.
Where are the people?
And Pam Hemphill ended up inside the Capitol building. She flew back to Idaho, still believing much of the dogma she had been taught that led to her coming to the Capitol.
The Democrats wanted this to be a communist country and that they were drinking babies' blood.
Did you believe that?
No, I thought that was kind of weird.
Okay. But did you believe that the Democrats wanted this to be a communist country?
Yes.
It wasn't until months later that Hemphill was arrested on multiple charges. After a plea bargain and pleading guilty to illegal entry to the Capitol, she was sentenced to 2 months in a federal prison in California.
I live with the fear every minute. You just live with it.
When she got out of prison this past September, she did have questions about the far-right talking points about Trump, but still considered herself a Trump supporter. However, a few months ago, she had a revelation.
So when you heard the former president say that he would consider pardoning some J6ers, it changed your mind?
Absolutely, 100%.
And what did you then think of Donald Trump?
That's it. He's just a master manipulator. He doesn't believe anything. He just thinks he's smart enough to pull the wool over you.
That is so interesting. All right, first of all, let's talk about what we heard up till now. She was diagnosed with cancer. Push this over here a little bit. She was diagnosed with cancer shortly before her participation in this event. Well, doesn't surprise me to hear that somebody who inevitably is going to be racking up a tremendous amount of medical bills wants to tear down what America is. Most of these people really don't understand how this stuff works all that well. They have to go off of things like gut feelings and oh, this person is playing to my culture, so they must have my culture's interests in mind. Case in point, she still thinks the Democrats want this to be a communist country. Now, there are people that vote for Democrats that do want this to be a communist country, whatever that means for her or for the people casting their vote. I suspect what they want is actually not too far off from what would have helped her an awful lot given that cancer diagnosis. What those folks want to be more specific is actually socialist stuff, by and large, including, universal health care. But how interesting that the thing that made her stop supporting Trump was that he said he would pardon January 6th defendants, something she was at one point. That's interesting. And by the way, that tells me she actually did learn something from her time behind bars and her experiences. Very interesting. Let's let it continue. I'd like her to clarify why exactly that got her.
But there's people like me waking up.
And do you feel the former president's responsible for that?
Absolutely. He's the king of that gaslighting.
One more.
All over you. Master manipulator.
And what did you then think of Donald Trump?
That's it. He's just a master manipulator. He doesn't believe anything. He just thinks he's smart enough to pull the wool over you. But there's people like me waking up.
And do you feel the former president's responsible for that?
Absolutely. He's the king of that gaslighting. It's a cult. It's a cult.
And then this happened just about a week and a half ago.
A right-wing person wrote something that's inaccurate, but it's important to this story. I'm going to read it. American justice, 69-year-old grandma with cancer given more prison time for walking inside U.S. Capitol than Hunter Biden for sharing classified documents with foreign regimes and multi-million-dollar bribery schemes. And then Donald Trump shared it on his Truth Social with the comment, horrible. When you saw that or heard about it, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
I got up, I was very angry, and I said, this is it. This is it.
In fact, Hunter Biden recently agreed to plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors to resolve a felony gun charge in exchange for a recommendation of probation. What Pam Hemphill decided to do was call out the former president on social media, writing, "Please, Donald Trump, don't be using me for anything. I'm not a victim of January 6th. I pleaded guilty because I was guilty. Stop the spin." And now Pam Hemphill wants to go back to the U.S. Capitol, but this time to testify under oath about January 6th. And she's already prepared what she wants to say if she's invited.
I just want to praise her. I mean, talk about putting in the work to make things right. Good for her. I don't blame her for not knowing a tremendous amount about politics, frankly. Most people don't, and it has been designed that way. The way things work modernly, the techniques used by politicians, what is considered acceptable behavior, the gish gabble, and all that nonsense where they avoid directly answering questions. It's designed to make people confused and bored with it. So I don't blame her for that. But now that she's had a glimpse of the reality and what she was involved in, she's actually working to make it right. Good for her. Let's see what she's going to say if invited. And by the way, I think she should be invited.
I am not a victim of the government. The Justice Department was not weaponized against me. I was a participant. We broke the law.
And she talks about the Capitol Police in her speech.
In the crowd, I was pushed down. My head was trampled on. My shoulder pulled out.
Jesus.
The Capitol Police saved my life that day. I want them to know how truly grateful I am to them and how deeply sorry I am for what happened and how they continue to be treated to this day.
Today, Pam Hemphill takes solace in her supportive friends on social media, her family, and God.
What would you say to Donald Trump if you could talk to him face to face, like you're talking to me right now?
Retire, get honest, because when you meet your maker, that's more important.
Gary joins us now. What a journey she's been on. What
I don't care about Gary. All right, that is very inspiring for me personally. I want to believe that there are people in that crowd who genuinely have been misled. However, let's be honest, that's me looking for confirmation bias. That's me looking for the information that I want. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it's undeniable. Pam exists. There are other folks who have, in amongst the thousands arrested, there are other folks who have genuinely repented and actually gotten a little taste of reality and no longer support the madness. And one thing that I'm confident is not happening, I'm confident Donald Trump and his ilk and this movement, they're not picking up votes. They're not making anybody suddenly start supporting them or seeing them as something that will solve problems, because they clearly don't. All they can do is rile up the people that do support them more. But frankly, I think the high water mark for Trump and Trumpism was 74 million. It's a terrifyingly high water mark. That means we cannot rest yet. We cannot relax yet. We need to make sure that in 2024, we just have to assume that every one of the 74 million votes that went out and voted for Trump is going to vote again, even though there are people like Pam Hempill out there who say, no, never again. I will not support that man. We just have to assume that it's going to be the worst it can be. But all signs to tell us what is the worst it can be, all signs say that it's going to be 74 million, a number we have beaten before and we must beat again. Register to vote, be ready in 2024, and take heart, because Trump's lost a few and gained none.